This is our amazing and super talented photographer friend Tony, as he's surprised to find himself watching a documentary all about him and the Halloween photography project he's done for decades. At this point, he doesn't even know that he's surrounded by his closest friends and family. This movie premiere and a few other things Tony doesn't even know about yet are a complete surprise to him. But before we get to all that, let's rewind about a year and a half to the original question. How in the world could I make a documentary about Tony to thank Tony for all of his generosity, include all of his friends and family, and keep it a surprise? The first step was to realize that this project is way too big for one person to accomplish. So I asked my friends Henry and Kelsey to handle big parts of the project. Because of that, they're gonna do most of the explaining on how we got to here.
Giving back and redemption stories.
Now, Tony has selflessly spent time taking amazing pictures of children and families in their Halloween costumes for over 20 years. I'm talking literally thousands of photos taken, retouched, and given away. So Dave thought this would be a super cool story of generosity. And if we did it right, a documentary could be made that would thank Tony and encourage people to use their skills like Tony uses his. Our first step was to sit down with Sarah, his business partner, and explain the idea to her. We wanted to know if Tony would think this was cool and would she help us. After getting a resounding yes to both questions, we got to work. Sarah was able to give us a long list of people who had participated in the Halloween photo project through the years. And so we contacted them to see if they wanted to be a part of the surprise. So many of them wanted to help and say something about Tony, which isn't really that surprising when you think about how selfless of a guy Tony is. People really loved the idea of giving back to him. But before any of the interviews could happen, the big question was, what do I ask them? Most of the time when you have a story idea, you first have to turn that idea into a script. That script goes through a whole lot of changes before you end up filming, and then from there you'll take all the footage you get and edit it into what basically becomes a visual version of that script. But with a documentary, instead of filming a fully realized script, you start with a general treatment that explains what you think the story of the documentary is going to be about and how to go about telling it. Finding the narrative along the way is a whole new form of storytelling for me. Once we had that treatment, we put together a list of questions that covered all the topics we wanted the documentary to focus on. It was so much fun to be able to meet so many people that had all been impacted by Tony's kindness. Everyone had so many great stories that they shared with us.
While Henry was interviewing people, I was collecting as much B-roll as possible. For this project, that extra stuff is basically lots of photos that Tony's taken over the years. The more recent years were easy. It's all digital files. But when Tony and Sarah started the project over 20 years ago, they used film. So to get those years, negatives had to be snuck out of Tony's studio, gently scanned in, and cleaned up. It was a very peaceful process.
After a full summer of interviews, we realized there wasn't going to be enough time to meet our original deadline. We were only going to get to do this once and wanted it to be as strong and as polished as possible for Tony. So we decided to take our time with the process, which allowed us to interview even more people and dive into the story deeper. It also gave us time to do something that I don't think any other documentary has done before. We got a chance to sit down with Tony himself and interview him for the documentary without him even knowing he was going to be in a documentary about him. Tony was awesome to talk to. The craziest part of all this for me was that this was the first time I'd actually met Tony. And after hearing about him for years, he really is as kind and as generous as people had told me.
It was pretty easy to get Tony to come in and be interviewed. The tough part was making sure that he didn't suspect anything. It's just not that normal to get a call asking for a couple hours of help, so a high school student can practice their filming, lighting, and interview techniques. Sure, it could happen, just not much. So we interviewed Tony about all kinds of things and spent a relatively small amount of time talking about the Halloween project, so he wouldn't get suspicious. The other thing Henry is not saying right now is he's already an accomplished filmmaker. Seriously, multiple award-winning short films. Links below to check those out. So I had to teach Henry how to act like an inexperienced filmmaker. When Tony came in, the lighting wasn't quite great yet. Henry sat far away and intentionally fumbled through some of the questions. If I hadn't been so nervous that Tony was gonna figure things out, it would have been hilarious.
Tony ended up talking about all kinds of things in his life and career. Hearing him talk about the fun he had while giving to others was inspiring to me. He wasn't boastful or egotistical and didn't flaunt his generosity. It was just so evident that that's how he lives his life.
One of the things Tony mentioned during the interview was that he liked the idea of eventually turning the whole project into a photo book. I really like that idea too, and also knew that since Tony is all about serving others, he's not going to take the time to do something like that for himself. And since we already had all the photos, I asked my friend Kelsey if she wanted to be a part of the project and make a photo book.
When Dave told me Tony's story and asked if I'd be interested in helping out with the project, it was an easy yes. I didn't even know Tony or his work initially, but loved the idea of being able to give back to someone using my design skills. My only reservation was that I'd never been tasked with designing a book where I had to organize and sum up decades of someone's work. I had no idea how I was going to do it or what I was getting into, but I was definitely going to find out.
Extending the deadline gave us the ability to film the Halloween photo shoot that year. Even though they've officially stopped the Halloween project, they still sometimes take photos for a few families. While I was filming parts of it for the documentary, Tony thought I was just practicing shooting B-roll. One of my favorite moments was when I was talking to Tony and he said something along the lines of, "You've been everywhere lately. If I didn't know any better, I'd say you were making a documentary about my life or something." To which I responded, "Wouldn't that be funny?" I was starting to fear that maybe Tony was catching on to what was going on. But after talking to his wife Dana, who was a huge help in the making of this project, she assured me that Tony didn't suspect anything, even if his joke was uncomfortably accurate.
After going through all the photos and getting a better sense of what I was working with, I started thinking through different ways to organize the book, which was honestly the hardest part of the book design process for me. Photos could be organized by theme, such as superheroes, athletes, animals, etc., or maybe organized by family. Eventually, I chose to go chronological, from start to finish, because I felt like it would best show not only Tony's growth as a photographer, but of the growth of the Halloween project and all the families shown throughout it over the course of the 20+ years. In addition to the photos, Henry was capturing so many awesome stories and quotes that I thought it would be really neat to include some of those in the book as well. Anytime I could find a match, quotes were placed next to their corresponding photos.
Through the coming months, I interviewed more people and found more bits of the story along the way. Things were going pretty great until it came time to edit it all together. Just as I was about to get started, I experienced every editor's greatest fear: a broken hard drive. The drive that had all of the interviews, B-roll, and audio we had gotten was completely gone. Yeah, not a great situation. Now, I did have most of the footage backed up somewhere else, but there were important things, like the B-roll of the Halloween shoot and pieces of Tony's interview that were only on the broken drive. I spent many sleepless nights trying everything I could to repair it. And once I reached the end of my limited expertise, some super smart friends spent many hours trying to fix it. And they did! On the absolute last day of the absolute deadline, they got back everything we needed. Everything. Thanks, Jeremy and David. After this experience, I went out of my way to buy lots and lots and lots of hard drives and back everything up way too many times so I'd never run into this situation again. From there, I was able to start building the first draft. Once I finished a version of the edit, Dave would watch it and give me his feedback. Based off his thoughts, I would make changes and polish it up. This process of going back and forth went on for a while. A good while.
While we had plenty of Halloween photos, a part of the documentary was causing problems. Tony volunteered for an organization called Big Brothers Big Sisters, and he is a big brother to Michael. Michael was kind enough to come in, be interviewed, and share the photos he had, but we still ended up needing more pictures of him and Tony. So since Michael had already shared everything he had, there was only one other person to ask.
Here we go.
Hey,
How's it going?
it's good, how are you?
I'm doing good. I just finished up a shoot. So what's up with you, man? What you got going?
I'm working on a project where it connects to like people building into people, and it's just like a slideshow. But long story short, I think you're a big brother, right?
Yes, I did it for about 10 years. I still keep in contact with him.
Did you ever take pictures of the two of you throughout the years?
Yeah, I did. I've got some. Like I got a black and white of me and Michael together. I really don't like releasing pictures of me with a mullet.
The mullet? You don't want too many people to see the mullet?
Yeah. No, I wore it well, baby. I rocked it. Yeah, I was thinking it was more like a little, perm.
I mean, with those, you just gotta let them roam free. Mullets and perms, like they're just meant to be out in the world.
They are.
Well, I really appreciate it. It's really helpful. I'll let you know.
You're welcome.
I'll let you know how it goes.
All right, man. Well, I'm gonna run in here, and I will, as soon as I can start sending stuff your way, I will.
Thanks, Tony. I'll talk to you later.
All right, thanks, Dave.
Bye. Woo!
After landing on how to organize the photos, structuring the entire book became the next daunting step. Ultimately, the photos were displayed in a grid that was 4 squares by 4 squares, or some variation of that. So as many of Tony's photos could be showcased on one spread as possible. For variety, some pages had certain images larger because I thought they were extra great. But everything stayed within that 4x4 grid so as to keep the book feeling consistent. Months later, the first draft was done. From there, Dave and I began the review process where he would print off the draft and mark it up with some feedback. I would then take the feedback, make the changes, and then we'd do the whole process over and over again.
This back and forth happened almost a dozen times before we landed on the final cut of the story. By then, we had easily watched it 100 times. From there, it got sent off to our friend Chris, who worked with the colors to make sure they looked really good. While he did that, our other friend Brian made sure all the audio was in tip-top shape.
As Dave and I were working through drafts, we also made sure to pass it off to a few of our friends, Alyssa as well as Dave's mom, for some spell check and grammar review. Once the book told the story of the Halloween project as best as possible and was free of all spelling flukes, we finally sent it off to the printer.
A movie premiere seemed like the obvious way to surprise Tony. But the question was, how do we get him into a room that was full of friends and family as part of the surprise? Sure, Dana and I could get him into a room by himself to watch it, but that just sounded sad. So the goal became to have something kind of like a delayed birthday party surprise. We'd get everyone into the room early, turn off the lights, and have a short film playing when Tony and Dana walked in. Dark enough not to see who the other people were, but bright enough for them to find the open seats. Plus, Dana had told Tony that this was a work meeting for her, so he would hopefully not be paying too much attention. Bonus, I know a guy with a few short films we could choose from. Tony is arriving in about 45 minutes. And how we got him here was I said, hey, Tony, I'm mentoring Henry, and he is interested in film. Every aspect of it. And he needs to practice in interviewing for like documentaries and setting up a set, lighting, and all that other stuff. Would you mind coming in? Since he doesn't know you, would you mind coming in and he'll interview you and ask you questions about who you are and what you do? And Tony being Tony, Tony said yes. So the thing Tony doesn't know is we're making a documentary about him because he's an amazing person that loves serving others with his talents. Henry, how we doing?
Doing great.
Yeah, we're doing great.
Describing him in one word. That's hard. Phenomenal. He's always been just a very giving person. He's proud of what he does, but it's not from a place of ego.
In the midst of college, I discovered photography.
So the year that we went to the portrait project, my kids were too young to complain about what they were wearing. And so we dressed them up like Raggedy Ann and Raggedy Andy, which was funny to us, but maybe not to them.
She has this picture of my son this last year of him, he dressed up like Thor, and he hit himself with the camera. These are the moments that
my children are always going to remember.
And he kind of just lit up talking about giving back and redemption stories. You know?
Those kids that work through Cafe Reconcile their portraits and how proud they are of what they accomplished and where they came from. Those are the moments that are captured that I hope they reflect on fondly.
Tony was or still is my big brother through Big Brothers Big Sisters of Greater Cincinnati. We were matched when I was 8 years old. The things that made me trust him was that he was fun. He was interested in what I wanted to do.
I want to say thank you. Thank you for being generous and thank you for loving.
It's been an honor to know you. It's been an honor to be your friend.
Oh, wow.
Thank you, everyone.
Wow.
I don't know how you pulled this off. I had absolutely no clue. Wow. Yeah, what started off as just portraits in the garage and just what this evolved to is truly amazing. I mean, it's a lifetime of friendship.
Well, thanks for coming, everybody. Thanks for coming, Tony.
Yeah, I'll never trust you again. That was good.
I guess I'm okay with that.
Yeah. I still love you, though.
Oh, yeah, well, I appreciate that. Kelsey's put together the photo book. So we're going to put up this wall. There's a party on the other side. One is for Tony, but there's also a copy for Sarah, because there is no,
Pull it off. I had zero clue. Yeah. Good job.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, you never did find that mullet picture, did you?
That's to your knowledge.
Yeah.
This project was both really awesome and really challenging. I don't know if Tony remembers this, but we actually spent a lot of time working on a project together last year. He was one of the photographers and I was an editor, and whenever we were in the same group, I'd be thinking in my head, oh my gosh, I'm working on something so cool for you, please don't come over here and talk to me or I might spill the beans. Luckily, I made it through the entire month without saying anything. Aside from that, I absolutely love that I got to be a part of creating something for another person who's given so much of his life to giving to others. It really is an honor, and Tony, your selflessness is contagious and inspiring. I'm so thankful for who you are to all the people involved in this project.
This was so much fun. Making something for someone like Tony, who was constantly giving of his time and talents to those around him, was so cool. It's having people like Tony in our lives that remind us that being selfless is always worth the sacrifice. And hopefully that inspires you to take the time to make for others.
If you don't know yet how you can make for others, a thing you can do right now is thank the people in your life that make your day better. Give them a call, a text, talk to them, whatever works best for you. If you're at a loss for words, a thank you sandwich is a great way to start. An example of that is, Tony, thank you for sharing your skills and generously giving to others. Because you've spent decades giving families amazing photos and stories, more people know what it looks like to serve others with the skills they've been given. Tony, thank you for showing us how to make for others.
Yeah, I was thinking it was more like a little, perm.
Mullets and perms, like they're just meant to be out in the world.
They are.